Casual magic is about how we can find beauty in the mundane every day. We all look forward to the 1% of days that we know will be extraordinary, like the birthday, the wedding, the job promotion. But 99% of our lives are just ordinary, spent in the same kind of routines with similar people. And wouldn't it be sad if we only allowed ourselves to feel joy 1% of the time? Casual magic is a tool to retrain your brain to find joy in things every single day that are casually magic. Hi everyone, my name is Jade and welcome to this episode of Finding Your Casual Magic. Today we are talking about one of my favourite topics ever, and that is friendship. How to cultivate deep, meaningful, platonic loverships that feel like a blanket of warmth and psychological safety as we navigate the pains of adulthood. Okay, so the reason that I feel like I am qualified to talk about this is for 3 reasons. Firstly, if there is one thing that I feel rich in, it is friends. I am blessed to have the most meaningful friendships, both in person and long distance. I feel so lucky because no matter where I go in the world, I feel a constant sense of love for my friends. But secondly, because it has not always been this way. I have had so-called friends in the past and yet felt incredibly lonely within those relationships. I have also lost friends, questioned what I want out of friendship, been hyper-independent and not wanted to burden those I love. And I struggled for years to share my vulnerable truth with friends for fear of rejection. Guys, for ages, I would rather talk to a camera alone in my room than be honest with a friend. And finally, because I used to be a bad friend. There it is. That is the big secret, the big T. Here I am doing a podcast about friendship, and I used to be a very bad friend. But I'm now not afraid to say it. I feel no shame because after years of reflection, I can now say that I am a very good friend. I'm not a perfect friend, but I am a good friend. And I think that's because I used to have tendencies that made me lose friendship. And I've had to do a lot of work to reflect on how I want to show up in my relationships. And I really hope that my journey can help inspire you to view your friendships in new ways. Today, I'm going to offer up my vulnerability for you to hopefully inspire you to recognize your own role in sustaining and strengthening deep friendships, including the effort and bravery required. All human relationships require bravery. They require us being seen. And so the fact that you're here listening and reflecting on how to put yourself out there or to heal relationships in your life is a brave endeavor indeed. And whether you're craving deeper friendships in your life, you're desiring a platonic love that feels safe and mutually investing, or you're just interested in some of the practical tools that I've learned over the years to proudly be a good friend, I really hope that this episode makes you feel seen from the heart and that you can leave feeling a renewed love for your friends of the past, present, and future. So let's get into it. But before we do, if you've been here before, then you would know that I love to start every single episode with a moment to really just ground ourselves and become present. So I invite you to try not to scroll, try not to be doing a million things while listening to this episode. I dare you to put on Do Not Disturb or airplane mode or whatever you need in order to feel here in this space. So I invite you to be here for the next 60 to 90 seconds and just focus on your breathing with me, and hopefully you'll come away feeling lighter and more mindful and ready to dive into the topic of friendship. Take a second to notice where you are in space. Are you in a room? If so, how big is the room? Are you outside? What can you see? And if you feel comfortable to do so, gently close your eyes. Start to become aware of your breathing. Notice where you can feel the breath in your body. Maybe noticing the rise of your chest and belly at the inhale and fall on the exhale. Imagine yourself rooting down into the ground, feeling grounded and aware. And maybe notice if you're carrying tension anywhere in your body. If you can, try to allow that tension to release at the exhale, we're going to do a final 4, 6, 8 breath where you'll take a deep inhale for 4, hold it for 6, and then exhale for 8. So when you're ready, deep inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold at the top for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and big exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Welcome to the episode. In the English language, we only have one word to capture all of the many different types of relationship that all constitute just being a friend. And I think that this does the topic a disservice because there are so many different types of friend. There are contextual friends, so the person that we sit next to at school or university or at work, and they help make that context feel easier and less lonely, but we might never text them outside of the context. And then there's the social media friend, the person that you follow, maybe you occasionally like or comment on their post. They do the same for you. You're both kind of silently observing each other's lives and supporting from afar. And then there's the new friend, the cafe-going, conversation-sharing friend where you're kind of nurturing this in its early fragility with the hope that it can eventually become a more permanent relationship. But maybe you're still on tenterhooks. You're not fully revealing yourself for fear of that relationship not being permanent. And then there's the people that we've known for years, the ones who can read our body language like a book, the ones who feel so familiar that they're almost more like family than friends, and they've witnessed so many evolutions of us. The ones where you can exist in companionable silence, the classic idea of the ride or die friend, right? Call you up in the morning at 4 a.m. when I'm having an emergency kind of friend. And as the philosopher John O'Donohue puts it, the superficial and functional lies and half-truths of acquaintance fall away, because these are the kind of friends who just exist beyond time and space and location. But the crazy thing is, all these types of relationship all fall under the one word, friend. And though each of these types of friendship carries so many beautiful nuances, it's like we're without the language to be able to properly capture and describe it. And I think this is partly why in adulthood, when someone calls us their friend, we don't know what that means. We don't know what to expect. Is that the new friend category? Is it the ride or die category? Is it the contextual friend category? And though each of these types of friendship has so many beautiful nuances, it's like we don't have the language to properly capture it and describe it. And so I think it makes sense that in adulthood, when someone dares to call us their friend, we're not exactly sure what that means and what we can reasonably expect from that relationship. Today, we're going to get into all of those nuances, but if you've been here for a while, you would know that I love to start off every solo episode by learning from the world, looking at some kind of statistics or papers or information that can inform the topic we're speaking about today. When we think about how to make friends, there's this misconception that friendship just happens. It just happens organically. We wake up, we interact with the world, and somehow we find these incredible people who make us feel seen and who are ride or die friends. But unfortunately, the research has shown that people who think friendship happens organically based on luck are actually lonelier. You really have to try and put yourself out there. I'll leave a link to all this research in the show notes, but cross-sectional and longitudinal studies over 5 years showed that more strongly endorsing internal or controllable causal beliefs, i.e. believing that making friends depends on effort, related to greater social participation and having more friends. Moreover, greater social participation related to less loneliness. On the other hand, external or uncontrollable causal beliefs, or believing that friendship is up to chance or random encounter, predicted greater loneliness. So this shows that, unfortunately, friendship requires effort. And actually having this belief that effort is required predicts that we will have more friends and be less lonely. Research shows that it takes over 200 hours spent with someone to consider them a close friend. Racking up that time is much easier when you're in the same classroom, playground, practice field, neighborhood, dorm room, or study group. And although over 60% of Americans consider having close friends crucial for a fulfilling life, 8% of people 18 and older report having no close friends. And as we get older, our social circle also starts to diminish. One study found that people generally have the most friends at age 25, and after that, we're in a gradual friend decline for the rest of our lives. This kind of makes sense as life gets busier, if you have kids, as career picks up, you just don't have as much time on your plate, you have so much to juggle. And one study found that once we settle down, we tend to shed an average of 2 friends. All the energy that went into maintaining those friendships is now devoted to a romantic partner. And this makes sense to me, given that our culture really prizes romantic partnership over friendship. Like in every movie we see, we watch the couple striding off into the sunset and happily leaving their friends behind. And I think there's still a prioritization of traditional values like family and home over cultivating one's friendship circles. Studies suggest that we have more friends in childhood, teenhood, and in our mid-20s simply because we spend more time around more people. But as we dip our toes into building a career and or family of our own, other relationships take center stage while our friendships fade into the background. And there was this really interesting study which kind of showed some of the common challenges throughout different periods of our life. So when we're in university, one of our biggest challenges for friendships is actually too high a frequency of social interactions. There's almost too many options of people that we could be friends with, and we have so much on our plates that it's overwhelming to maintain the relationships. And then when we're in our early career, we have limited time due to job commitments. When we reach parenthood, if we reach parenthood, then we start to prioritize family over social interactions. And then in midlife, this is actually where most people start to reevaluate the importance of friendships. I think I've definitely noticed that in my own parents, having the whole empty nest syndrome when the kids move out and they have to start to reevaluate where they want their social connections to come from. And I think recognizing these dynamics in different life stages can help prepare you, maybe help you adapt to some of the challenges that you're in, and hopefully help you prioritize friendship more. And perhaps one of the most common ways to adapt to these different life stages while prioritizing friendship is social media. And there's so much research to show both the benefits of social media for our connections, but also the drawbacks. And the National Library of Medicine published this wonderful paper in 2022, which explored some of the dangers to social media use for our perception of self, insecurity, and friendship quality. And I think understanding these dynamics and trying to find ways to best prioritize friendship can help mitigate some of the very real mental health challenges that young people face today with regards to feeling a sense of belonging in the world, feeling loved. And there are some statistics we've got. 1 in every 3 young adults between the ages of 18 to 25 feels lonely. And among that 34%, more than half reported that they lacked a sense of meaning or purpose. Close to 40% reported that they had only 1 or 2 caring friends. 12% said they had no caring friends. 44% of young adults reported feeling like they matter to people only a little or not at all. And 60% wanted friends to reach out more, to ask how you're really doing, and to really listen. And I think this is just evidence to show that we have a bit of a loneliness epidemic, at least, where these studies have been conducted, and I think is quite classic of our individualistic world in the West, and this very real desire to have people who know us deeply, who are in our corner, and us feeling maybe this sense of dissatisfaction with the relationships we have in our lives. And it makes sense why, because as Professor Rose Ann Kenny, a professor at Trinity College Dublin, says, she recommended that you should put just as much effort into building friendships as you do choosing your food or selecting the physical activity you like. Guys, friendship matters for our health and well-being. Research suggests that people who are more socially isolated have higher levels of inflammatory chemicals in their tissues, which over time could lead to poorer health. Relationships are like stress relievers because they calm your body down, they take you out of fight or flight mode and back to equilibrium. That's at least how they think it works. And wow, if that doesn't produce an incentive for us all to reprioritize the role of friends in our lives, then I don't know what is. Like, this proves to us that friendship matters, our relationship matters. And we're going to get into how I didn't used to believe that. We all want friends, and evidently friendship is so essential to our sense of well-being. It contributes to our sense of self, our happiness, and even our health because of the detrimental effects of loneliness. I want to rewind back to my own experience of friendship, back to when I was not the best friend because I didn't really value friendship. I didn't understand how essential it is to our well-being and sense of self. So in secondary school, I was never really popular. I had to experience bullying and stuff because I was this nerdy girl who just cared a lot about grades. But I always had a few really good friends. Like, I had really kind, wholesome, lovely humans to sit with at lunchtime and to do sleepovers with, and all these like classic fun things that you dream of as a teenager. And I always felt very lucky to have those friends. But back then, what I cared about more than anything else was achievement. I've mentioned this briefly in a few other episodes, but I was such a child of hustle culture. In my free time, I would read self-development books and think about how I could be the best version of myself. I would make vision boards to put on my wall. I would think about how I could complete my impossible list, my bucket list for my life. And yeah, I would think about how I could get the top grades, get the dream job. I'd spend loads of time emailing dream organizations to work with. And just my system of values was much more oriented around, honestly, myself, but also my own dreams. And I perceived happiness, the endeavor of happiness, to be the endeavor of trying to succeed. And while I really do believe that there are so many benefits to being ambitious and striving for your goals and learning habits for discipline, tools for getting things done, what this mindset led me to believe is that friendship was not something I needed to value. I had a mindset that I inherited from productivity culture, which is where you value the output. It's much more output driven. I almost wanted to quantify the value of friendship more tangibly. So in this culture, we're invited to view our relationships through a more transactional lens because of the rise of service businesses. So for example, you can pay for the service of Uber, where someone will take you from A to B rather than needing to rely on a friend or ask a friend to give you a lift. Or you can pay for TaskRabbit to have someone come over and build your wardrobe for you. And so you no longer need to rely on your friends to come over and help you build it. And I think this kind of capitalism, productivity drive of valuing output made me view my friends through that lens too. And I'd question, oh, how is spending 2 hours at their house just talking, how is that benefiting me? Like, what is that tangibly resulting in? I can't see that output. And that's just such a sad way to view human interaction, through this lens of what can I get out of it. And the importance of working on my dreams manifested into hyper independence, where I genuinely believed that I didn't need anyone for anything to make me feel happy or to help me. Like, I really believed that I could do everything alone. I had so many habits and tools for self-soothing that if I was struggling emotionally, I believed that I could just hold myself away, go journal the feelings out, go meditate them away, and that I didn't need to invite anyone else or burden anyone else with those problems. And I was always really willing to listen to others. Like, I was a space where friends could come to share their problems, and I loved being part of it. I loved helping people with whatever they were struggling with. But when it came to me struggling, I would just so much rather deal with it alone. And I viewed that as strength. I thought that independence meant strength, right? Like, oh, I don't need anyone. I'm so self-sufficient. But I think there was a deeper root within that, which was just fear, like fear of being vulnerable with people, fear of what friends would say if I was to truly open up about the things that I was struggling with. It's so much easier to just deal with your struggles alone, right? Like journaling is useful, introspection is useful, but you can also only get so far when you're trying to solve everything alone. And humans are not islands. You know, we have to let other people into our struggles in order to feel supported and to view them through new lenses. And so even though I was a really good in-person friend, the second that I was not in those contexts, the context of school, the context of, you know, being in person with friends, I was uncontactable. I was just so hard to reach. I would ghost friends. I wouldn't reach out to them because I didn't see it as valuable to let them into my struggles or what I was going through. When I wasn't, you know, in the context of school, I was focusing on all the things I wanted to build, all the projects I was doing. And so that manifested in me being quite an unreliable friend, because when you're with me in person, I'm so present, I'm so there, I'm enjoying your company. And yet the second that you're not in front of me, you know, where's Jade gone? Like, does she still care? And I think that was really hard for a lot of my friends back then because it was such mixed signals. It would get to the point where I would rather reply to YouTube comments or Instagram comments than message my friends because I viewed it as having a tangible output, right? Like if I am fostering community online, that's contributing towards growing my channel and building a career. Whereas if I just message my friend, like, what is that doing? What's that giving me? And of course, because I was devaluing my friendships, I absolutely took them for granted. I had this assumption that because of the history of our friendship, that they would just always persevere, that my friends were a permanent thing in my life, whether I chose to reply or put effort into them or not. And you know what happened when I left secondary school? I lost all my friends. I got into this guilt cycle where friends would send me messages, check-ins, like, oh, how are you, Jade? How are things? And I wouldn't reply to them for like a day. And I'd be like, I'll reply tomorrow. And then it'd be 2 days. And I'd be like, oh, okay, I'll reply in a few days. And a few days would come and I hadn't replied. And then I felt guilty for not replying. And so I was like, oh, okay, I don't want to deal with the guilt and the feeling bad and the shame of not being good enough, that I'll put it off again. I'll find a perfect moment where I can write a dramatic long text apologizing for the fact that I've not replied to them. But because then I built that up in my head, I would also not do that. And it just led to this endless cycle of feeling guilty for not replying, which immobilized me from action even more. And then I wouldn't reply even more and then I'd feel even guiltier. And it got to the point where I just convinced myself that I didn't need these people and that I was okay losing these friendships, when really I think there was so much shame and guilt in how I had treated them, and this like slow realization that friends aren't permanent. You have to pour effort into them if you want them to remain in your life. And just like I underestimated how much effort it takes to keep friends, I think I overestimated my capacity to just find new, incredible, deep friendships like that. Like I genuinely had this belief that friends are easy to find. And I think this came from like my belief of not really needing anyone. You know, it's like independence. It's like, oh, of course I can just magic new friends whenever I need them. And it doesn't matter if we don't have history and long connection and all the wonders of, you know, evolving together. It's like I felt like that didn't matter. I was happy to, you know, go traveling and go to a hostel and meet someone for 2 days and call that a friend. But during my gap year, when I was solo traveling and when I was making all these new friends and, you know, I was going to the hostels, I was meeting these incredible people from all around the world. Like it was amazing and I did make all these new connections. But I started to realize that new friends don't always cut it, you know? Like there's something to say for people knowing you for years and for having experienced so many different situations and experiences with you. And there were moments that year where I felt so lonely, but because I hadn't fostered my friendships from secondary school, I actually didn't have anyone to turn to. Like, I couldn't rely on these new friends, these like cool, fun, surface level friends that I'm meeting traveling. But then I hadn't been fostering the friends from the past. And I also didn't have a history of leaning on them in vulnerable moments. And so I kind of just perpetuated my own loneliness. And I think it was such a wake up call for me to be like, Jade, you need to learn to prioritize your friends more. But I felt like I was in this hole of not being able to get my old friends back. So I was like, do I now foster the new friendships? That was a lot of my gap year, was just like questioning what kind of friends I wanted to have and how I could find them. And towards the end of my gap year, before I went to university, when I was starting to realize the value of these connections, I did reach out to some of these friends and I met up with them, expecting us to just click again and go back to how we were at secondary school. But I experienced this awful heartbreak that comes with realizing that you've grown apart. Like, I was just living a very different life to the majority of my friends from secondary school. Most of them went to university and I did the whole gap year travel thing. A lot of them, you know, had very similar experiences with freshers and the nature of studying at uni in the UK, whereas I was self-employed. I also had ventured out of our little hometown and been able to see the world in a way that maybe they hadn't. And so I felt like my mind was also open in new ways and ways I hadn't even realized until I then came and spoke to them and maybe couldn't relate on the perspectives that they had on things. And I think it's so sad when there are people that you love but you just can't find common ground in the same way that you used to, because your interests are changing, your experiences are changing, and you're kind of like clutching at old memories with the hope that you can rekindle that shared love. But meeting old friends actually made me feel lonelier and even more misunderstood. Research shows that up to 70% of close friendships and 52% of our social networks dissolve after 7 years. Yet when we consider our friendships, we rarely think of them as finite. Oh, that is so depressing. But the older I get, the more it feels so true. You know, at secondary school, I really believed in the permanence of my friendships. And yet to this day, I maybe have one or two friends from secondary school who I'm loosely in touch with. And it's sad to think of how those have dissolved. But life trajectories just change so much. And it's so hard to maintain them as those changes happen. And before I get into how I now have these nourishing friendships and how I've learned to be a better friend, I've been thinking a lot about those times where I really struggled with friendship, and also analysing it not just from how I was acting, but also the cultural lenses around us that encouraged me to act in that way. And I've already nodded towards the idea of hyper-independence and productivity culture, but I think there's this belief we have in the Western world where we really don't want to burden other people with our problems. We don't want to ring someone up out of the blue because we assume that they're busy, right? Or that they already have so much on their plates. We don't knock randomly on their doors and just burst into the house at any random time of day because, again, there's this assumption of busyness and everyone having their own private lives that we can be part of when invited, but not at any given moment. And something I've really struggled with, which I think is related to British culture, is I have been raised around indirectness. Like, it's very common in England to say things that you believe in the sentiment of, but maybe you don't fully mean. And there's just politeness to it. So, for example, when people say, oh my God, you should come around sometime. Like, you should come around for tea. You never actually know if they mean it or not. I'm like, are you being polite? Like, or do you actually want me to come to your house? And it's just, we normalize people saying things that they don't mean. And I think it's really hard to know where you stand. And similarly, when you invite someone round and they're like, oh yeah, sure, I'd love that. again, you have to read between the lines. Does this person actually want to come? If they do come and you say, oh, you can stay until X time, and they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like, I just find it really hard to trust what people in England are saying. And I think I've only had that realization since being able to study abroad and having friends from different cultures and realizing that that's not a norm everywhere. And I think it just produces a lot less certainty in our relationships in this country. And I think this culture of indirectness is exacerbated by social media, because so often we're witnessing the highlights of our friends' lives. We're getting to observe them in a chosen way, the way that they have chosen to display their life. And it's hard to know whether we're actually wanted in the real day-to-day lives of our friends, or if they kind of want us at that distance that we're receiving from witnessing their lives on social media. And I think there's an interesting paradox within social media, because though we're all aware of the superficiality of what our friends are posting and the intentionality with which they're showing their lives, we can still feel a very visceral FOMO or jealousy, right? Like a desire to be part of the lives that they're sharing, or a feeling that our lives just aren't enough in comparison to what we're witnessing. I had a really interesting conversation with a friend recently about why she doesn't like posting on social media and why she feels that it's so strange how many of her friends are observing her life without like commenting on it or liking it. It's just like almost like these ghosts of the past just getting to witness her life for free, but not knowing what they think about her life, or not knowing if they're actually supporting what they see. And to me, social media works and is a positive thing if you're having real life, real world connections with your friends too. Because if you're in regular contact with a friend and you know about the struggles they're facing, you know about the difficulties in their life, you have that constant rapport, then it's so fine seeing them live their best life on social media, right? Like, it's so easy to celebrate your friends' highlights when you're also involved in the real world struggles that they're facing. Like, I'm so here for seeing my friends looking hot and badass and amazing. I'm like, oh, let me like that. Let me hype them up, because I feel connected to them. I know that whatever they're choosing to show me, like I'm receiving that, also knowing that I'm part of the rest of their life, the part that they're not showing. And I think it's only when we feel really disconnected from the people in our lives that witnessing the highlights reel becomes difficult, because we think that we extrapolate that as being their entire life. And I think one of the biggest difficulties around friendship culturally is that there are not the same expectations for friendship as there are within romantic relationships. So for romance, we know that that's going to be hard, right? There's going to be some hard work involved. We know that there's going to come a point where no matter how uncomfortable it is, we're going to have to start to be really open and vulnerable with a romantic partner. And if things aren't working, we know that we're going to have to tangibly break off that relationship. There's this idea of a breakup, right? So there'll always be some kind of closure. But we don't owe that to friends. We don't have to sit down with friends and express what it means for us to have a good friendship. We rarely say to friends, here are my needs. Here is what I need to feel loved or to feel seen. Oh, it hurt me when you didn't reply for a week. It hurt me when you ghosted me. Those are things that we don't really say to friends, but we would be more likely to say to a romantic partner, because there is an assumption that that relationship requires the uncomfortable type of depth. I think it is easier to just gently lose a friend, right? To not have any real closure, to just kind of like ghost a friend, to not really talk to them for a while, and for them to gently fade out of your life, rather than have to undergo the risk in vulnerability. It is so uncomfortable to sit a friend down and be real with them about things that you desire in the relationship, things that are going well, things that are going wrong. But those are the conversations that are required to have real trust, to have real depth of friendship. They always say, right, a relationship is strengthened when it is tested. But I think we have a culture that leans away from moments of testing, especially in England, right? I talked about indirectness. We're an avoidant culture. We avoid these moments of discomfort and keep it lovely and surface, but therefore don't experience as many deep and meaningful connections because we don't earn them. And the reason that I've been able to reflect so much on the nature of expectation setting within romantic relationships versus friendships is because I studied abroad, and I was the only person from the UK in a cohort of about 160 people at university. And all of a sudden, I was around people from all around the world who had very different conceptions of friendship, of what it means to set expectations within friendship, of being direct about their feelings. And just my entire lens on relationships started to shift as I went through university. I started university with a similar pattern to what I described with my secondary school friends in my gap year, right? Where I was a really present in-person friend. I'm quite extroverted, so I found it quite easy to speak to people and create these new connections. But what was this huge turning point would be every summer at university. I had a 4-month summer where I went back to the UK, everyone else scattered around the world. And all of a sudden, I once again became uncontactable. I was so present in my real world life that I wouldn't text my university friends who had just lived these intense semesters, these bonding familial semesters. And by the end of a 4-month summer, I felt a lot less close to my friends because I was not investing that time, energy, and effort. And in my second summer of university, one of my best friends at the time, I had not replied to her for maybe 2 weeks in summer, right? She sent me all these voice notes and I just ghosted her because I was overwhelmed by all the messages. And she did what no one in my life had ever done before, which was directly call me out for not being a good friend. She was like, Jade, we have to talk about this. We got on a call and she said, I value you so much as a friend, right? We've just had this incredible semester. I think of you as one of my best friends, but I'm so confused because when we leave the setting of university, it feels like you don't want to be part of my life. And she laid out what it means to be a best friend of hers. She said that, she requires, me to like reply within at least a few days or to explain why I'm not replying if I'm not. And just this idea of regular contact was so important to her. And because I'm naturally quite an avoidant person and I'm not used to these moments of conflict where people are very honest and direct about their feelings, I was so scared when she said this, and it made me want to run and it made me want to just abandon the friendship. Like, her daring to be vulnerable was actually something that made me really uncomfortable. But now, with retrospect, I see it as one of the biggest gifts and turning points of my life, because her doing that forced me to take a step back and to review my habits and to see it with less of a selfish lens about what I like to do and how I like to text and how I like to be a friend, and to also see it in the context of what are the needs of the people I'm calling my friends. What does it mean for them to see me as someone that they can trust? And it just flicked this switch. And I was like, you know what, Jade? I need to learn the skill of being a good friend. And that means putting in effort. And that means learning to text back, even if I say that I'm not a good texter, right? I cannot use that as an excuse anymore. If this is important to my friends, then I need to learn that skill. And am I a perfect friend now? No. Do I instantly text back all my friends? No, I don't. But I am a lot better than I used to be, because I'm willing to have these conversations with friends about my nature of texting, their nature of texting, what their expectations are, what is most important to them to see me as a close friend, and just being willing to lean into the discomfort of these conversations to understand what everyone's needs are and how to maintain a friendship of real closeness. So, for example, to this day, I still am not a texter by nature. That's not the way that I feel most connected to people. So I realized that calls matter more to me. And with all my best friends from university, all my best friends are long distance friends. They're scattered around the world. I have some best friends in New York, in Hanoi, in Vietnam, in SF, like scattered around. I have recurring scheduled calls with all my friends, and it's just the most life-changing thing ever. So every single Tuesday, I have a 2-hour call with 2 of my best friends, and it's a non-negotiable in all our lives. If we can make that call on a Tuesday evening, we will do it. And I feel so connected to them, even though I've not seen them for almost a year and a half, because we just all pour this energy into maintaining our closeness. And I have a 1-hour call on a Friday with my best friend, my roommate from university in Vietnam. And again, she's also not a texter, but we both make the effort to have that call. And so we just feel so part of each other's lives because we're putting in that mutual effort. With the rest of my friends, I have different like time scales of recurring calls. So one of my closest friends, I call them once a month. Another friend I call once every 6 weeks. Another friend I call every 3 months or even every 6 months. And it's just put in our calendars in a way that doesn't require us doing the awkward texting thing of, oh, when are you free? And, oh, I'm not free on Tuesday. I can't do 6 p.m. Can you do 7 a.m. tomorrow? Oh, no, I can't. And like, I hate that back and forth of trying to work out when to call. And to me, that friction is the reason that we don't keep in touch with our friends. Like, it's too much effort to schedule. And so having something recurring that's fixed in the calendar has just been so life-changing for me, choosing to put in that effort, but also doing it in kind of a frictionless manner to keep in touch with the people that I love. So I guess my point is lean into the discomfort of really honest conversations with friends about what they mean to you, what you mean to them, and how you want that to manifest in tangible actions. Like, do you want to text? Do you want to call? Do you want to hang out? What does friendship mean to you? And it's also okay if you're the kind of friends where you say, I don't want to text you at all, and I just want to follow you on social media. But when we next see each other, I know that things will go back to normal and I'll be excited to see you and love you. Like, that's also fine. I think it's just working out what the dynamic is for you guys and compromising so that you both feel comfortable in that relationship. So that's piece number 1, is figure out what you both want and need. And then the second piece is put in the effort. Guys, put in the effort. Friendship matters. It matters for your well-being. As we looked at earlier in this episode, it really matters to your sense of self, your sense of humanness, right? Knowing that there are people who love you, who are going to support you in your times of struggle. And even if it does feel difficult to maintain friendships when you've got a million other things on your plate, I hope you just remember that the return is absolutely essential. The return is not something quantifiable, is not something output driven that can have a number put on it. It's much deeper. It's like a nurturing of your heart and humanness and self. So, what is some of my best advice for how to maintain and deepen your friendships? Communication. You've got to learn to be honest with your friends about how you value them, about what your needs are, about anything that isn't going well in your friendship, your desires, daring to be vulnerable. And there are also some statistics to show that leaning into conflict resolution has so many incredible benefits for your well-being and the well-being of your friendships. Research finds that engaging in healthy conflict brings people closer, and that people who engage in healthy conflict have greater well-being, are more popular, come on, slay, and have less depression, anxiety, and loneliness. And when people avoid conflict, they often choose to distance themselves instead, which damages relationships. Which was me. Me used to be avoidant, and yeah, definitely damaged my relationships. So I can agree with that stat. So yeah, just lean into the discomfort. I know it's so uncomfortable, but it's so good for you. It's so good for the relationships. Like, even for me, something I've learned to do now is to just be honest with the people I love when I'm starting to feel guilty about not replying to their messages. So if I've not replied to a friend for like a week or 2 weeks, just sending a little voice note to be like, hey, just wanted to let you know, I love you, I care about you, I'm just overwhelmed, I'm busy, and I've noticed that I've been dreading replying to you because I feel guilty. And then I mentioned earlier in this episode, this guilt loop I used to have where I'll feel guilty for not replying, so I won't reply even more, and then I'll feel even guiltier, and then I'll just end the friendship. Rather than ending the friendship, I'm trying to cut off that loop. I'm trying to say, let me let you into my guilt so that I feel less shame about it. And I reply to you and I let you into it and we can figure that out together. And that is another way that you can be vulnerable. Another really big common difficulty with adult friendships is that we only meet up and tell each other about our lives rather than living it with each other, right? So if I'm going to call a friend, it's like an exchange of biographies. Oh, yeah, here's what I got up to this week. And oh, yeah, here's how my dog is doing. And yeah, work was fine, thanks. And you just get into the habit of repeating things about your life like you're talking to your diary, which is necessary, of course, to still feel like you understand where someone is at and like you understand the struggles that they're going through. Like, it is important. But I think we need to find more ways of living life, being present together in new ways. So almost having joint attention on something that is not necessarily us. So if we're watching the same TV show together, or we, meet up regularly to cafe hop, try out new coffee, or we go to an art gallery and talk about the art, like making new memories is just as important as speaking about how our lives are going. And finally, I just want to say it's okay to quote unquote burden the people in your life with inconveniences. Like if you're struggling with something, I understand how it can feel like you'd be burdening someone to reach out to them and to let them into that experience. But you are never a burden, right? Like, inconveniencing the people in your life is what builds real, true connections of trust. Even daring to say to your friend, oh my God, the next time you go to the supermarket, can you pick me up this thing? Or I'm going to be in your area. If you want, I can hand deliver this to you. Like, making the effort to extend the burdening of your own time for friends and then allowing them to do that for you too. Because inconvenience is actually just like the beauty of life. Like, the only reason we see things as inconvenient is because of productivity culture. Like, allow yourself to lean into the delicious slowness that comes with human connection, to really dissolve into conversation without checking the time and checking the to-do list. These gestures remind your friends that they are valued, that they're being thought of, especially if you both have busy schedules. It's a way to bridge that gap. Guys, I sincerely hope that you are able to make your friends feel loved and held and seen, and that is reciprocated. I hope that you have someone to call when you're feeling low. I hope you're able to let people into your struggles. And I hope you know that you are worthy of the dream friendship you desire. You are worthy of love that makes you feel seen. If you've listened to this whole episode and you feel like you don't have the friends that I've been discussing, like, firstly, I'll make a whole other episode on how we actually find friends at some point. But I think one first step that you can take is to really be that for yourself, to practice the kind of love that you desire by being that for yourself too, and to pour it out with the hopes of also receiving it. Keep believing that you have it and it will come to you. We've got to manifest and attract what we want. Be a friend to yourself first. If you've been here before, then you would know it is a tradition at the end of every episode to share my casual magic of the week, and then one of you guys will also share your casual magic of the week. And if you're interested in being featured, you can send me a little voice note over on our Instagram page. Okay, this is extremely relevant to the theme of today's episode, but yesterday I sent a very vulnerable message to a friend, and I was so anxious about her response. It was just something that had been on my mind for a while that I was too scared to express. I was like, Jade, just do it. Like, these are the things that you preach. These are how you create strong relationships. And so I sent it, and she just held my message in a way that was like the dream way, to be honest, that it could have been received. And she made me feel so validated and held, and it really strengthened our relationship. And I kind of had this moment of zooming out and realizing that past Jade would never have done that. I would have just swept it under the rug and moved on and hoped that our friendship survived. But yeah, I think when we lean into bravery, we reap the rewards. And they're so beautiful. And now we're going to listen to one of your casual magics of the week.
Hello, Jade. This is Maike from the Netherlands. I wanted to share a bit of casual magic with everyone today. So, a few months ago, one of my best friends and I, we used to do these winter swims, like little dips. We go to a local river and we just go into the cold water. And because of circumstances, we had to stop doing them. I just kept thinking back to them, and today I was scrolling through the news and I saw this beautiful picture of this lady swimming in a really cold body of water. So I was like, this is my sign, I have to do it. So I grabbed my bathing suit and I went down to the local river and I swam in it. And I just felt super connected to the nature. I felt so energized afterwards. Like if you've never tried it, it energizes you like nothing else. So I wanted to share that because it made me really happy. And I wish everyone a really good day, and I hope some of you try it and feel it for yourselves. Bye!
Okay, and at this time every week, I ask you to reflect on the week that has just passed and answer a few little journal questions in order to form an intention for your coming week. So feel free to get out your notes app, grab a diary or a journal, or maybe even just answer these questions in your head. Ask yourself, what went well this week? What is something that I'm proud of? What is a little win? And what is something that maybe challenged you this week? Or something that you would change coming into the next week? And then, based on this, what is an intention that you would like to set for the coming week? It can be a word, a phrase, or a theme. I've spent a lot of this week alone. Like it's been very rainy and wintry feeling, and I think I have just internalized that by like holding myself away a lot and kind of working on projects alone. And while it's definitely served me in moments of feeling peace and romanticizing the coziness, I think next week I would love more people. And so my intention is going to be community, or even like bravery, because I'm in a stage of making a lot of new friends and going to events where I don't know anyone. So bravery and community. Thank you guys so much for listening. Oh, it always just means the world that you're here, especially if you made it to this part of the episode. Like, oh, just so incredible. It means the world. And as always, if no one has told you today, please let me remind you that you are enough. You are enough exactly as you are, no matter how many friends you have, or no matter the depth of your relationships. You are enough. Simply the act of you existing and being means that you are enough. I'm sending you so much love, and I can't wait for next week's episode where we're going to be discussing friendship in even more depth. Bye guys, stay tuned and stay magical.